It is good to be with you. Welcome to WUSA 9 Plus. I'm Simone D'Alba.
And I'm Larry Miller. We are with you online leading up to today's March for Israel on the National Mall, which kicks off at 1 o'clock this afternoon. It's been 5.5 weeks since the Hamas terror attack inside Israel started that war. About 1,400 people were killed in the initial attack and more than 200 people were taken as hostages.
Since then, the Gaza Health Ministry, which is run by Hamas, says more than 11,000 Palestinians have been killed. This war has sparked worldwide demonstrations. We've seen both in support of Palestine and Israel. Our Matt Gregory has been on the National Mall all morning as people arrive for the March for Israel. And Matt, what's the atmosphere like right now? We can see people walking behind you. Last time we saw you earlier in the noon show, people were just starting to arrive. What's the energy like?
I mean, the energy is one of, it's hard to explain, right? It's one of like joy in some respects. People are feeling the collectivism of coming together, the solidarity with Israel, but there's also a collective idea as we're here of people who want to not only, as you've been talking about, stand with Israel because of the hostage situation with Hamas, as well as denouncing anti-Semitism. As you can see, people have been streaming in and they continue to. We really are reaching a point where we're seeing, thousands of folks. But one of the things we wanted to find out when we came here, and I've been here, like I said, since about 4 in the morning, was what was bringing people here. Because we saw people coming from across the country and across the world, and here's some of the sound of what we heard when we got here.
I felt that it was really important to come out here and show my support and stand with Israel and stand with all my Jewish brothers and Jewish sisters.
Aaron Logston made the quick trip down from Rockville. He says he's felt the sting of anti-Semitism over the last month at school.
Like one of my classes, there was maybe 7 people in the back of class that were just talking about how, Hamas is justified for it and how good thing the Jews had it coming.
This last month has been hard. I've lost friends, I've lost some who I would even consider family.
Judah and Aaron, joined by thousands of others, coming to call attention to the hostages taken by Hamas, others to denounce anti-Semitism, but all together as one.
We're a people united, which is not something you can see very often in the Jewish community, but we're proudly united.
Like a sample of what we were hearing, but also we talked to people from all different walks of life and all different age groups. These were the younger guys, and I talked to a mother with her kids who brought them all the way down from Buffalo, and she said it was important to stand with Israel, but also to show her children what it means to stand with Israel and what that looks like. So as you can see, this is the young people, the older folks. Everyone has come here today to stand with the Jewish community, and we're seeing more of that as we get into it. Now, I can hear over my shoulder music as they start to get ready to give the speeches. Those will begin at 1 o'clock, but you'll be hearing from some of my other colleagues, Eric Flack. You'll also hear from Scott Broom as everyone kind of points to the different things that are happening in and around this event today as March for Israel takes the National Mall. For now, along the side of the National Mall, I'm Matt Gregory. Back to you.
All right, Matt, appreciate that perspective. We had heard some of our sources saying initially 40 to 60,000 people were expected, and then Adam Longo's sources were saying it could be up to 100,000 people today. Yeah. And you see them beginning to gather out there.
Well, caravans of buses from all of our major cities have been making their way here to Washington. We've also heard of a number of flights that have been packed with people coming from the West Coast making their way here. I do want to piggyback on one thing that was mentioned by Matt Gregory, specifically as relates to the increase in anti-Semitic assaults that we've seen. The Anti-Defamation League noting that since the war began, 832 anti-Semitic incidents of assault, vandalism, and harassment have taken place nationwide, with an increase of about 316% during the same time last year. Certainly an indication of where things stand right now.
Well, and to your point, we've seen polling in addition from the Jewish Federations of North America, who are the organizers behind today's march, for some context here. And they're making it clear that some of their polling is indicating 70% of U.S. Jews say they feel less safe since the start of this war. And so that's something we hear some of you saying at home, and we are listening, and we do continue our coverage today with organizers. Well, they've planned a slate of speakers for today's march. In fact, they do have 3 stated causes here today that they are out here. One is to support Israel. They're pushing for the release of the hostages, and they are trying to combat anti-Semitism.
Yeah, let's check in with our Scott Broom. He is on the National Mall right now with more about how this afternoon's event will unfold. Some of the speakers, Scott, we understand include Van Jones, a CNN commentator, actress Deborah Messing, even family members of the 240 hostages. Scott?
There's a lot of excitement and a lot of seriousness around these speakers for people who are arriving here this afternoon. I've been checking in on the security situation. As you may know, the Mayor Bowser, declared this a level 1 security event. That means that all of the federal agencies involved with security in the region are running an interagency operation to maintain security around here because of the high number of anti-Semitic incidents that the Anti-Defamation League has reported in the wake of the Hamas war. They say anti-Semitic incidents, including online hate, are up 400%. There are no planned counter demonstrations or no significant conflicts that we witnessed today, with the exception of something going on behind me. This is a group of people who describe themselves as Orthodox. Many of them appear to be speaking Russian, and they believe that the war in Gaza is unjust and that Israel is actually fomenting anti-Semitism by causing the war, and that has created some friction among groups here. You can see there's a pretty significant police presence because this protest has sparked a lot of emotion with people who stand with Israel who are walking by. My partner behind the camera is Dion Wiggins. We're going to swing around this way. I wanted to show you some of the security arrangements that have been made. This entire enclosure here today is completely fenced. It's a 100% security environment where everybody attending the rally on the inside on the mall has to pass through a security checkpoint, mag detectors, and many of the other things that we are familiar with in demonstrations like this one. 4th Street all the way up to 12th, all the cross streets on the mall are closed at this time to maintain essentially a secure environment between Constitution and the opposite side of the mall. Many of those streets are blocked off by dump trucks, and there is also the presence for support on the perimeter of unarmed DC National Guard personnel to add to the number of people who might be available if there's a security incident. So security extremely tight here. Many of the people who are now inside this essentially secure zone from Constitution onto the mall say they feel good about what they're seeing today, but they are deeply concerned about anti-Semitic incidents, thus the security presence we're seeing here today. Reporting live from the National Mall, Scott Broom, WUSA 9.
All right, Scott Broom, thank you so much. We've been talking about anti-Semitism, but there's this other component that we're seeing here right now as well. The Council on American-Islamic Relations also noting bias incidents toward Palestinians, and that group in particular talking about an increase of about 216%. So we're seeing it on both sides of the aisle here. And we're also seeing this more chatter about the need for a ceasefire. This war has been going on for well over a month right now. A lot of Palestinians have been killed as a result of this war. Even Secretary of State Anthony Blinken saying Friday that far too many Palestinians have been killed, and many now calling for a ceasefire.
We know how, deeply divisive and touchy this is on both sides, and so many emotions. But I did want to touch on your point, Larry, which is, just less than 2 weeks ago, there were thousands of people attending a pro-Palestinian demonstration. And, we saw so many people attend a rally then, which started at Freedom Plaza. It ended at the White House. And so that just kind of speaks to people want their voices heard. Whichever side you're on, no matter how you feel, people are dying. There are innocent people in the middle of this conflict, and people want to know that how they feel is being respected and considered throughout this conflict.
And no doubt they're making their voices heard today. Well, the standoff at Gaza's largest hospital continues. Israel says it's a legitimate military target because Hamas uses it as a command center.
But Palestinians say innocent civilians are dying at a place that should be protected in war. Tina Kraus has the very latest.
With Israeli troops surrounding Al-Shifa Hospital in the heart of Gaza City, Palestinian authorities are proposing a supervised evacuation of the complex that still has about 600 patients and many civilians taking shelter.
Lives in Gaza are hanging by a thread due to depleting of fuel and medical supplies.
Gaza's biggest hospital has become a major focal point because Israel says Hamas has a command center under it and is using doctors and patients as human shields. Gaza's Hamas-run health ministry says 40 patients, including 3 babies, have died since emergency generators ran out of fuel Saturday. Israel's military says it's trying to deliver incubators to potentially move babies to safer locations.
Our war is against Hamas, not against the people in Gaza, especially not the sick.
Israel has not provided proof Hamas is running operations inside Al-Shifa.
These are explosives.
But it did release video claiming to show weapons and tunnels used by Hamas under a children's hospital. There are signs hostages, young and old, may have been held there.
Clothes and a rope. Look above it. It's a baby bottle in a basement.
Above ground, fierce fighting rages. New Hamas body cam footage shows a fighter firing a bazooka, while Israeli troops push deeper into Gaza, looking for militants and about 240 hostages captured October 7th. Hamas now says it's ready to release up to 70 women and children in exchange for a 5-day ceasefire. Tina Kraus, CBS News, London.
The Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry says more than 11,000 Palestinians have died since Hamas attacked Israel back on October 7th.
Well, a poll released by the Associated Press last week shows that since that war began, Americans have become more likely to describe Israel as an ally that shares U.S. interests and values. However, they're also divided over whether Israel has gone too far in its response to last month's attack.
And while 44% of Americans now feel Israel is an ally with shared interest and values, that is up 12% from a pre-war poll, only 36% say it's extremely or very important to provide aid to Israel's military to fight Hamas. And 40% say Israel's military response in the Gaza Strip has simply gone too far. All right, we are just now about 15 minutes away from the start of the March for Israel.
Yeah, in addition to our own news crews at this event, there are many others, including CBS News correspondent Natalie Brand. Natalie, good to see you as always. Thanks for joining us. Tell us a little bit about where you are along the National Mall and what you're seeing at your location.
Hi, Larry. Simone, good to be with you. Well, so we are on the perimeter of the fence, keeping an eye on the huge security presence out here, and then also speaking with demonstrators as they're walking into the event. And, you know, as you've been seeing from the images, tens of thousands out here. We've talked to people from across the Northeast and beyond, from as far as Los Angeles, from Florida, Tennessee, Atlanta, you name it, just groups of different demonstrators have come from all over, flying or taking buses to get here for this event. And to build upon the conversation that you were having just a minute ago about the different demonstrations that we've seen, the demonstrations in solidarity with Israel and also those in solidarity with the Palestinian people, I spoke to one demonstrator who said that the Israeli people have the right to defend themselves from terrorism, from Hamas. And he told me he believes that the Palestinian people will be better without Hamas in the picture. And he also said his ultimate hope here and prayer is for peace for both Israel and the Palestinian people. So a really important sentiment just to keep in mind as so many thousands come here to stand in support with Israel today at the National Mall. And also, they say, take a stand against terrorism and against anti-Semitism. There's a lot of concern in the Jewish community about what they've seen in terms of the rise in incidents recently. And this is something that we know the Department of Homeland Security has mentioned a increased report of events, bias and discrimination against not only the Jewish community, but also the Arab community as well, which explains why we're seeing such a heightened security presence, not only police on every corner, but road closures, and as your other crew is alluding to, security to get inside.
Natalie, you've touched on this to some degree, but why was it so important, so poignant for the people you spoke with from all across the country, from LA, Tennessee, traveling thousands of miles by bus, by plane, by train, to physically be here in the nation's capital today? What were they telling you?
Yeah, well, one man from New Jersey here with his family said that he couldn't imagine missing this event, that there's been such turmoil in the Jewish community since October 7th, that he felt like this is the very least that he can do, to come here with his family and stand in solidarity with so many other Americans here at the National Mall from all over. And also important to note, it's not just members of the Jewish community, but we've seen other faith-based groups as well coming here to stand in support of Israel today.
Natalie, I want to kind of get to the question about a ceasefire. I wonder if these demonstrations that we're seeing here today and what we saw even last week, we know of another pro-Israel demonstration that took place in Paris on Sunday. Do these growing demonstrations put any pressure on the administration to call for a ceasefire?
Well, we know from hearing the president's own words very recently, he said that a ceasefire is not what they're talking about, that he has called for humanitarian pauses in the fighting to allow for humanitarian aid to get into Gaza and for innocent civilians to get out. So the White House has been clear that what it's calling for is for humanitarian pause. That's something that, was revealed last week as a development and something that Israel said that it would implement. But when you talk about ceasefire, President Biden said that's not a possibility in his mind, that's not what the White House is calling for, but rather these specific pauses, a few hours in time, again, where aid can get in and innocent civilians can get out.
All right, CBS's Natalie Brand along the National Mall for us today. Thank you. We appreciate your reporting.
Let's bring in Dr. Gregory Gause. He's a professor at the Bush School of Government and Public Service at Texas A&M University. He's an expert on the international politics of the Middle East. Dr. Gause, good to see you this afternoon. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
I want to get to one of the big questions right now. You're seeing the demonstrations taking place, not just here. We had another major demonstration, a pro-Israel demonstration on Sunday in Paris. We have this pro-Palestinian demonstration that took place a couple of weeks ago. Kind of give us your sense about what we're seeing right now and what these growing demonstrations mean.
Well, feelings are running very strongly on both sides of this conflict, without a doubt, because both sides have legitimate stories to tell and both sides have suffered. There are innocent civilians on both sides who have suffered in this conflict. I think that the really interesting thing about this conflict is how much it engages people all over the world. Gaza is a very small place. It's not a particularly significant place geopolitically or economically. And yet the conflict in Gaza right now seems to have grabbed the imagination of people all over the world.
I wanted to touch on, for more context here, we know the roots of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict run so deep. I mean, that's such an understatement. But when did Hamas enter the picture? And why do they control Gaza? If you can help us kind of understand that.
Hamas is the military branch of the Muslim Brotherhood in the territory of what used to be the Mandate of Palestine, Israel and the occupied territories. They emerged as a political force during the first Intifada in the late 1980s as a challenge, both politically and militarily, to the PLO, which had begun a process of, or in the early 1990s, began a process of negotiations with the Israelis. Hamas has always opposed those negotiations and refused to participate in the first elections in the Palestinian Authority. However, in the second elections, they did participate and they won a majority of the seats in the Palestinian parliament. That led to conflict with the PLO, the Palestinian Authority, and it led to basically a short civil war in 2007, in which the Palestinian Authority retained control over the West Bank, but Hamas took control of Gaza.
Dr. Gause, given the sort of conflict that we've seen over the years, was this war inevitable given the growing tensions between the two groups?
I would say no war is inevitable. There could have been steps taken toward a political solution that might have decreased Hamas's appeal in the Palestinian community. But without any movement towards some kind of political solution between Israel and the Palestinians, then these kinds of events are probably inevitable, although the severity and the tactics that Hamas used on October the 7th clearly are not inevitable. That was an excessive use of force against civilians that I think in the long run will probably harm the Palestinian cause.
Well, I wanted to kind of, expand on your point here because, the big question is where do peace efforts not only stand, but where do they go? And is there a path forward? And I think back to what the Biden administration was trying to do and some administrations prior, which was to foster this grand bargain in the Middle East, some kind of normalization of relations. And so when you look at it contextually and looking forward, what kind of a path do you see?
Well, there are two issues here. One is, will other Arab states normalize relations with Israel? The Biden administration was pushing very hard for Saudi Arabia and Israel to normalize relations, and there had been perhaps some progress toward that goal. That progress is now on hold and perhaps reversed. Then there's the more immediate and the basic question, which is between Palestinians and Israelis. Can there be some solution found to divide what was the historic mandate of Palestine into two states in which both of those people will have national rights? That, I think, is less possible than it perhaps was in the past because of political trends within Israel toward the right, and also within the Palestinian community, the strengthening of Hamas, the weakening of the Palestinian Authority. So I fear that the prospects for a two-state solution are probably further away than at any time in the recent past.
Dr. Gaz, more than 400 federal employees have sent a letter to the administration demanding a ceasefire. The letter saying this, that was sent today: we call on President Joe Biden to urgently demand a ceasefire and to call for de-escalation of the current conflict by securing the immediate release of Israeli hostages and arbitrarily detained Palestinians, the restoration of water, fuel, electricity, other basic services, and the passage of adequate humanitarian aid to the Gaza Strip. There are growing calls for a ceasefire in the region, but it appears that this is sort of a delicate balancing act for the Biden administration.
I think the Biden administration is looking for, in effect, a ceasefire, but not calling it a ceasefire. And I do think that the letter sent by the federal employees is an indication that public opinion in the United States, although still very strongly supportive of Israel, I think is less willing to see Israel as exclusively a victim in this conflict than might have been the case in the past. And that's a very interesting development coming out of the public opinion reaction to this war.
Dr. Gregory Gaz, professor in the Bush School of Government and Public Service at Texas A&M University. Thank you for your time, sir. We appreciate the insight.
My pleasure.
All right, it is 12:56, and we know that the March for Israel is about to officially get underway at 1 o'clock. And so we're going to take you back out to the National Mall, where we know that Scott Broom, our reporter, is standing by there. And let's go ahead and check in with him, kind of get a feel for what he's seen in terms of the crowds here. We hear that they've grown in the last 20 minutes or so. Scott, good afternoon.
Yeah, they're growing as we speak. A very steady stream of people continuing to arrive here at the National Mall. My colleague behind the camera, Dion Wiggins, can show you what we can see here outside the gates. This is the huge number of people that are walking towards a secure entrance where they will be going through magnetometers before going into the inside on the other side of the fence into an entirely secure zone down here on the National Mall. The size of the crowd for a lot of the people I've spoken with today is a reaction to and a demonstration of what they want to show is support for Israel in the wake of a lot of the protests, both around the country and around the world, in support of freedom for Palestine. So clearly a lot of the people who've come here today want to show that Israel has stronger support, they believe, here in the United States, and that is a lot of what this is all about today. There is also, I've spoken about a couple times today, anxiety about security, in particular because of anti-Semitic incidents, according to the Anti-Defamation League, that have been on the rise since the beginning of the war and the tensions around the war. This is a very secure zone down here. In fact, there are National Guardsmen who have been called out by Mayor Bowser to provide support on the perimeters. The Guardsmen I've seen today have been unarmed. They're largely dealing with traffic control, blocking intersections with some of their military vehicles, along with a lot of the city vehicles and snowplows that are being used to block off intersections of the cross streets of the mall here between 4th and 12th for this major rally event today. People are still arriving. They've come from all parts of the country, as we've observed. We've talked to people from Los Angeles and LA. We've spoken to people from Canada. Quite certain there are some folks here from other parts of the world as well. They're continuing to arrive, and no way to estimate the crowd. in any official sort of capacity, but here at 4th Street, as far back as at least 2 more blocks, it appears to me as though the mall is completely full, and by my estimate, that would be tens of thousands of people here at the beginning of this event, with many, many more still arriving. That's the situation on the National Mall in this Support for Israel rally. Scott Broom, WUSA 9.
All right, Scott Broom, thank you so much. And, you know, we're seeing more and more people make their way to the National Mall, but the objective is clear. This is a march for Israel to free the 240 hostages that remain, and a march against anti-Semitism.
And we did want to emphasize, too, Scott had touched on this, but parking restrictions, those street closures, they will be in place for much of the day. We have all of that information online at WUSA 9 if you have any questions about those. And keep in mind, you're going to see the National Guard in place around the city. Essentially, they're making sure, you know, safety is top concern. They're also helping to manage traffic. We've been hearing that congestion could not only be a major concern in terms of traffic, but also if you take the metro.
Absolutely. So make sure you plan ahead for that. Give yourselves plenty of time to get to your destination. We'll be following the March for Israel all afternoon. Keep it right here to WUSA 9 Plus for frequent updates.
And we'll have the very latest from the March on Israel on WUSA 9 starting on the news at 4. Thank you for watching.